on the verge of enacting a new restrictive ban on abortion.
Back away from it, guys.
Despite hours of intense protests and strong debate,
the bill is declared to have passed the Senate and the title was agreed to.
Iowa lawmakers overnight passing legislation blocking the procedure after the detection of cardiac activity, banning abortion at roughly 6 weeks before most women know they're pregnant.
And unfortunately, Iowa's Governor Kim Reynolds says that she does in fact plan to sign legislation that effectively bans abortion and will do so this week, likely on Friday. Now, the restrictive bill passed the Republican-controlled legislature just last night, and after she signs it, it will go into effect immediately. In fact, she called for a special session just so state lawmakers would vote on this abortion ban bill. Don't worry though, I'm gonna tell you a little more detail about how it passed and then what the impact will be. The legislation passed Tuesday, bans most abortions after fetal cardiac activity has been detected, often around 6 weeks into pregnancy. The bill also says a provider must perform an abdominal ultrasound on a patient, and if a fetal heartbeat is detected, an abortion is prohibited. Don't worry though, because the measure includes a few exceptions, kind of, such as for rape and incest, provided that the cases are reported to law enforcement. It also includes exceptions for fetal abnormalities that are incompatible with life and for medical emergencies in which a pregnant person faces death or serious harm to their health. I think there's nothing more ridiculous than the rape and incest exceptions, because they know how that's gonna work, right? Woman's gonna go to the police, like she would have to go to the police, she'd have to report it to the police, which means that even if she doesn't wanna prosecute, she doesn't wanna go through that terrible process, if prosecutors decide to go through that process due to the allegation of rape, she would have to go through it. And it is unclear to me at the moment whether that case would have to be adjudicated before she can get an abortion.
And if how long would that take?
And that would take a very long time. Our criminal justice system moves at a snail's pace. Don't believe that we have speedy trials here.
Yeah, and what if, I know this is inconceivable, what if the person who rapes her is her parent? How are you supposed to get through that situation? Like they understand all of this.
They do.
Literally none of this makes any sense. They're throwing around the term heartbeat when they're not talking about anything having to do with a heartbeat. They've also, by the way, never explained why it is that that's supposed to be some sort of moral turning point. The idea that something has a beating heart means that, well, then obviously at that point you can't harm it. That's never stopped a single person from eating literally any animal. So I don't understand what the moral imperative implied by fetal cardiac activity is supposed to be. But in their defense, they're not making the case. I believe that the health of the mother exception, which we know from the experience of many states is worth almost nothing, because you can say that there's an exception for it, but get a doctor to actually be willing to face lawsuits or prison time for applying it. So we'll see about that. And even then, I believe it stops at 20 weeks. So after that point, even if your life is at risk, they're like, whatever, it's in God's hands, I suppose. There's obviously a significant number of issues here. Also, I would just like to reiterate, and I get strategically exactly why they do this, but if they believe, and they definitely believe, and they're very clear that they believe this because they crow about it all the time, that the reason this needs to be banned, and it is banned, it's 6 weeks, it's not a limitation, it's banned in Iowa. Why the exceptions for incest and rape?
Because
is it murder or is it not murder?
Well,
or is it that you don't really think it's murder and you know that banning it in that case would just look really bad, even worse than you already look? You clearly don't actually think that it's murder, or else it wouldn't make a difference that it's incest or rape.
That's a really good point.
It's a complex political situation that you guys are trying to have your cake and eat it too. Well, and you're losing even on that, even in Iowa.
Well, that's okay. So what's so fascinating to me about this is when you look at the midterm elections, the reason why Republicans failed to carry out a so-called red wave is because the abortion issue hurt them significantly. Because among voters,
and they've clearly learned from that.
They have not learned. You know what? Good job, Republican Party, because I thought it was only the Democratic Party that was dumb enough to learn all the wrong lessons from the unpopular things that they do. Okay, but no, Republicans are just as guilty. Like the fact that State lawmakers in Iowa saw the backlash to the Republican Party as a result of the reversal of Roe and thought to themselves, you know what, let's keep this going. You know, most voters not into this. Even Republican voters want to protect abortion, certainly in the first trimester. The numbers start going down once you get to the second trimester. But nonetheless, this is not a popular policy, but they keep pushing for it, which is super fascinating. And look, you also have to keep in mind, you make a really good point about the impact this is gonna have on women's health overall, the chilling effect it's gonna have on doctors, and that chilling effect is not a bug, it is a feature, right? If a doctor is worried about potential criminal prosecution for treating a woman who has a risky or harmful pregnancy, they're just not gonna wanna carry out any risks, right?
And that's not a hypothetical, we've already seen it.
We've seen it in Texas, we've seen it in states that have passed similar legislation. In fact, Francesca Turner, a Des Moines gynecologist, said that the bill doesn't make clear when doctors can step in during pregnancy complications. At what point, when your wife or daughter or your sister is having a medical emergency during a pregnancy, do I get to save her life? Turner asked. So a lot of questions are going unanswered. Maybe it's because we're talking about state lawmakers who aren't experts in women's health, opining and making regulations on women's health.
Well, and have no interest in learning. They're not actually interested in it whatsoever. Right. So we also throw around terms like, health, life is threatened. What do you think that means? Do you think they run a test for is life threatened? And then it comes up thumbs up and you're like, oh no, we gotta do, that's not how literally any of this works. That's not how medicine works. All of it is estimations and guesses based on complex evidence, trying to figure out what the risk is. Your life isn't either at risk or it's not. It can be severely threatened, it can likely be threatened, all of this. And so a doctor is supposed to step in at that point and risk being locked up for a decade to try to figure out, is it worth it to save a life? Because I might go to prison, so. I mean, and they know literally all of this. They put the exception in to make it a little bit less grotesque when they pass it, and that's it. They don't make it something that people can actually rely on when their life is on the line. And by the way, like, you've talked in general about how difficult this was for them politically, and they know that, and they're doubling down on it again. It is.
They're like, they rush to make this happen.
Exactly,
too.
all over the place.
Yeah.
And like, I know that people are disturbed by this, but I wonder if they're disturbed enough that like they spend 50 years trying to win people over to thinking that people who can get pregnant should have no bodily autonomy whatsoever. And they obviously failed at that. They never succeeded in that. They somehow still take over the Supreme Court. They destroy Roe v. Wade. In that, they then lose a ton of elections, even ballot initiatives in places like Kansas where you thought it would have been like easy, doesn't. They lose a bunch of these elections. And then they come back and they look at a state like Iowa. Kim Reynolds says that she's doing this to, I've heard the voices of Iowans, and we have to do this. 61% of people in Iowa want abortion to be legal. 70% specifically of women want it to be legal.
Look at that, you memorized it.
We talked about it this morning. But
fun graphic to show you.
Oh, I apologize.
There you go.
That's better than me saying it. Just put that over when I was talking, I apologize. So they clearly don't care, like they do not care about the likelihood that there will be ramifications. They think, oh, we'll do this or whatever. Some people will lose their positions, I'll probably be fine. And it'll make some conservatives happy because the only time that they ever feel any elation is when someone else's rights are being taken away. Of course, their life isn't going to improve, their financial situation doesn't improve. So we're gonna have to find something crazy to do next year. There's still legal birth control, we can probably roll that back.
God,
surrogacy, IVF.
Don't give
what?
Michael Knowles more encouragement.
100%. Yeah, condoms, definitely.
I heard from Michael Knowles that condoms are pretty gay.
I have heard that.
That is literally what he said on his show.
So, okay, so the next year or two in Iowa is gonna be fun because the Republicans still have no interest whatsoever in talking about actual issues and fixing real problems. Yeah. So what insane bat-ass crazy stuff are they gonna be focusing on in the next session?
So look, today abortion providers and the ACLU sprung into action. They filed a lawsuit against Iowa's 6-week abortion ban, arguing that it violates the state constitution. So a hearing is scheduled for Friday in regard to that lawsuit, and that's just before the governor, Kim Reynolds, is set to sign the ban. And here's a chilling look at how reproductive rights are faring nationwide, okay? So Iowa is shown as legal for now, but come Friday when Kim Reynolds signs the bill, they will join the other red-colored states where abortion is pretty much banned, largely banned.
It was already banned at 20 weeks, by the way.
It was banned at 20 weeks, yes.
Yeah, it's not like it was totally permissive or
22
whatever.
weeks to be specific, but yes.
Okay, I thought I read 20, okay.
Yeah, so that's what's happening in Iowa. Really curious to see how this impacts their state politics, right? If there's any change in voting patterns, considering how unpopular this legislation really is. We'll see. But it is pretty devastating that they're focusing their energies on taking rights away rather than finding ways to improve people's lives and bolster the healthcare system there, maybe the Medicaid system there to offer more healthcare to ordinary people, maybe improve people's lives. What a crazy thought.
Fix the issues with maternal mortality.
Right.
People are actually dying every day.
I know, but pro-life, am I right?
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.